Welcome to the nominee interviews for Epoch 7. And with me today, I have Vetemor. What is up, my man?
I'm good, bro. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, let's not waste any time. Let's just jump straight into the question. So, the first question that I have for you, Vet, is this topic of council pay. It's here every single epoch. It's just not going away. What are your thoughts on the current structure of the council pay, and how do you feel it's just being approved? The IIP changing from stablecoins to ILV as a payout. What are your thoughts on that and the current structure of the council compensation?
So part of the reason why it was approved is because, I mean, the reason why initially it was always in ILV, and then it was changed to be paid in USDC or USDT instead. And part of what that was actually just a communication mistake between the person that wrote that and Danny, because Danny then immediately said to that person, like, well, actually, mate, like, no. Like, getting paid in ILV is better for our runway. And we knew this as soon as this epoch started. We talked about it in the council, and we immediately were like, well, at some point during this council, even if it's like at the very end, we'll reassess, but like we're most likely going to change it back to ILV. So we kind of knew that this was going to happen the whole way. As for like people suggesting that, council pay is reduced, the sort of logic that is backing that, like at the moment, is the fact that, it's the bear market. Like, the team has suffered, they've sacrificed, the community sacrificed. There's been a lot of sacrifice on all sides, and there's this feeling of like the council members, they don't appear to have sacrificed anything. And I think that is actually a fair point. I get where that comes from. Personally, like, my view has always been we should pay council members, and we should pay them a good amount so that they have a solid incentive to do the job that they're doing. And beyond doing that job well, that they have something that if they feel that they're underperforming for their wages, instead of decreasing their wages, they should work harder or do more. But I do understand the sentiment. Like, where it comes from for me, like, personally, is that I'm probably the only person on this previous epoch as a council member who has actually decided to go absolutely full-time in Illuvium. So that council pay has actually enabled me to continue being able to be full-time in Illuvium, even though it's a bear market. So I think that's a solid time commitment. But if the community does feel that council pay should be reduced, and the other council members in the following epoch agree to it, I mean, I guess I would be supportive of it being cut somewhat. There's been argument for like $2,000, and for some of the most responsible people in the DAO that have legit like a solid responsibility, I think $2,000 is like a tad low. I'd probably settle for 4 or 3K, and I think that's a fair like middle ground. But that's obviously something that should be discussed further. But beyond that, like, obviously governance version 2 is coming soon, and there will be a change in the way that the pay structures of council members work within that. And I think the community is going to appreciate it.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, you answered kind of my follow-up question of what is the compensation that you think would be adequate if there was a change. You have answered that. So what I want to do is I want to stick on that point about sacrifice a little bit longer. And so this is a question that's being put on me by the community, and it's one that I've been asking everyone, and I'm curious to see what your take is. So if you are elected, would you be willing to forfeit the council pay for the good of the Illuvium runway? Yeah. I'll let you run with that.
Beyond that being a loaded question, and not loaded, I'd say leading, would I be willing to sacrifice the council pay to benefit Illuvium runway? Currently, council pay doesn't affect Illuvium runway because the runway doesn't pay council wages. The treasury pays council wages using ILV tokens. The treasury has well over 1 million ILV tokens, like more than 1.5 million ILV tokens, whatever council members are getting paid is, a piss in the bucket, excuse my language. Like, it is legitimately meaningless and not of any substantial meaning. So it legit doesn't affect the runway of the project. How, like, if council members are getting paid $1 million a month, that's going to be an issue. But currently, it's not that high. It's nothing insane or worrisome. Council members are, in fact, the only people paid by the DAO in ILV tokens. Everybody else works in exchange for USDC or dollars, and that affects the runway. So I think that's my answer to that one.
Yep, not fair. All right, so we won't stick on that. Let's move on to the next topic now. And the question is, in the last 6 months, have you contributed to Illuvium, and why do you believe that this contribution has been helpful and beneficial to the DAO?
So obviously, I have a slightly different answer than somebody might have who isn't a council member right now. Yeah. But as a council member, I have contributed to the Illuvium DAO by being, I would say, one of the most active council members that we've had in the entire history of the DAO. Beyond that, within council meetings, I would also argue that I am one of the most active and vocal members, council members that I've witnessed in my 9 months of being on the council. And when I say vocal, there's like 2 ways of being vocal. One way being like just loud and actually kind of annoying and just raising obnoxious points for the sake. Yeah, right. And for the sake of it. Whereas like what I've done over the last 6 months in this epoch is all of the community's like concerns, points, requests. Like, I've done my utmost to raise each and every one of those in the council meetings, and I feel like I've done it pretty successfully. There's been the issue generally with being on the council is that things actually happen somewhat slowly, and that's one of the most frustrating things because the work that you put in is also not visible publicly, because we can't just say everything that happens in a council meeting as things currently stand and the way that things are structured. But beyond just like what I've done in the council meetings, I also make Illuvium content. I've been a little bit dry for like maybe the last month when it comes to content, but that's just because it doesn't feel like too much has been going on that I can speak about. I do my best whenever I provide content to just make it educational and something that not only people might want to see, but also that they'd actually need to see. So I do my best to engage in that way. Beyond that, I also do the trivia, which has been really fun together with Dick Kings, and I've assisted somewhat with the governance to creation and feedback and that entire process, which has been interesting. Big shout out to Daraji and Dick Kings for that, because Dick Kings, thanks to him, it was all enabled, as there was a good few months at the beginning of the epoch where it was sort of like I was literally every council meeting asking for work, and every time they'd say, oh, like Gov V2, like, well, until Kieran sort of gets the initial thing ready, we can't sort of start on it, and it's like, okay. But he steamrolled that and spearheaded it. And then Daraji has done a ton of work on that. So like big shout out to Daraji on that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. So this is a question that I'm very, very interested to see, to hear your answer with. And that is, what is the unique value proposition that you think that you can offer that separates you from the other nominees?
I appreciate that question. So different council members should offer different things, and it wouldn't be great if the council had people offering the same thing like all across the board. So just to use the previous council as an example, like Daraji offers like analytical, in-depth on numbers and all of that, whereas on my end, what I feel that I bring that nobody else brings is that I'm a great communicator I'm good at expressing things, as I'm also very empathetic. So I can empathize with multiple viewpoints. Whether I disagree with you or not, I'm willing to take on board what you have, even play devil's advocate to anything that I think, so that we can actually like have a discussion around it. And what that basically means is, at the end of the day, I feel that I represent the community more than I represent like content creators or something. I don't feel like I'm that content creator on the council. I feel like I'm a community member that is like, I do my best to be the voice of the community, and that's what I've strived the whole time I've been on the council to do and to be. And I feel like I execute that very well. It's up to people's judgments if they agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so you've kind of mentioned this a few times now, and I want to dive in a little bit deeper about governance v2. So we are very close to governance v2 being proposed. What do you personally see as the major flaws of governance v1? And if it were up to you solely, how would you amend them in governance v2?
So for me, one of the biggest flaws in governance v1 is the lack of being able to utilize the talent within the Illuvium community. And what I mean by that is, like, there's a lot of people that have a lot of skills, and whether that be in gaming and they're trying to get involved more and they just don't feel heard, or whether that's in a more tokenomic side or anything, there's people all over that don't feel heard, that don't feel like they're able to talk to a council member or something. And I've done my best to be as like approachable as possible, but I feel that needs to change in Gov v2. Obviously, I'm actually aware of what Gov v2 is going to look like, and that's one thing that I'm really pleased that is going to be better in Gov v2. And just that accessibility and the approachability of governance for everybody. We've all done our best to make it as accessible as we can, but it's a flawed system in that there's currently like obviously Kieran's not approachable, Santiago, he's not really approachable, and they seem to be shoo-ins in the current system. And then there's left like, so at the moment, I think I'm like the main person on the council that's like community like focused. Daraji, he touches the community as well, but in a different way, as does Sheep as a moderator as well. But like, it's not as good as having way more council members potentially to be able to touch like a wider variety of the community and actually onboard the ideas and IIPs that people have like just more readily. Which is why I'm so excited for Gov v2.
Yeah. And like I'm very excited to see what the community does think when that is proposed to them publicly. So
which should be very soon.
Yeah. Well, let's fingers crossed that it is very soon. Depending on when this video comes out, it might already be out, right? So let's play ball here, and let's say that you are elected into this council again. If Governance V2 is approved during your term, would you be willing to cut your term short in order to conduct a new election and transition into Governance V2, potentially risking your position on the council?
Not potentially. Like, it would just end.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, yes. No, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Because I might not get re-elected into Gov v2.
Correct.
Yeah, no,
correct,
I 100% would be in complete favor. So the moment that Gov v2 proposal goes live, what I expect to happen is we have some debate, and then either, for the most part, it looks good and we vote it in, and then it's just a matter of preparing everything to get it ready, or we have to edit it a few times and all that back and forth. Regardless, it will eventually get to the point where it's ready to be voted in by the council. Once the council votes it through, I believe that it's at that point we should give, like, I don't know, 2 weeks, a month notice for this change, so that people can start getting ready for new nominations and a new round of elections. And once those elections end, then the current council that's about to be voted in, I do believe should just be disbanded, because I think it's very important that we have GovV2 established as soon as possible, because GovV2, to some extent, is an experiment. And because it's an experiment, we want to establish it as soon as possible so that we can actually edit it and streamline it, and people can get comfortable with how it works. And so that once the game does finally come out, we have an established system of governance that not only functions, but functions efficiently, smoothly, and has clear lines where like clear ways in which the community can engage with it and interact with it. And that's why I'm so excited for GovV2, because it is going to be just so much smoother and more understood by the greater community. Because right now, like, how does governance work? You ask that to the average community member, and between 5 different community members, you will see at least slightly different response. What are the duties of a council member? Like, if between my opinion and maybe even yours, TSG, there are probably differences. And that's going to be clearly defined, and the roles will be clearly defined, and all of that will be defined very clearly. And there's going to be very clear ways where that's explained, not only in video form by creators, but actually in like very clear form officially within Illuvium. And I'm excited for that.
No, absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought up the point of council member duties, because that leads us straight into the next question. And that is, if you had to write a formal IIP to clarify what the council members' duties and time commitments would be, what would be included in that IIP? What are your expectations of a council member?
So personally, my expectations of a council member are that they're engaged in the Illuvium community at least somewhat. So I appreciate that there needs to be a level of expertise, which the way that you get that expertise is you probably have other duties and you're probably involved in other projects, or you have a different job, which I think makes sense. Like maybe it would be great to have a lawyer on the council, right? That has that kind of expertise. Not everybody on the council should be like a full-time community member. I that doesn't make any sense to me. But like I believe that people should be spending at least some level of time within the community. So call it, I don't know, at least 5 hours a week, just like on the Discord. People can say that there are like other communities of Illuvium, and there are, but I think that the main community right now is in the Discord. If you're completely disconnected from the Discord, which I think is okay if you're like the team member or something in one of the councils or something, but I'd say, you know, let's be honest, Kieran does spend time in the Discord. We have a great team. It's amazing. Beyond just spending time in the community, there should be at least 5 to 10 hours a week of just having discussions with people on different topics. And that doesn't have to be publicly. That can be very much privately. So personally, what I've done in past councils is I spend only so much time in actually IIP discussion, having governance conversation. I spend a lot more time having governance discussions in either my DMs, because not everybody's comfortable to be exposed publicly. Some people in the Discord that they'll say something and then people just jump on them and they're like, I don't want this, so I'm just gonna DM a council member and have a conversation about it privately with them. And that's one way I've garnered the community sentiment in greater depth. Beyond that, I'll be in voice chats with various people. Honestly, I probably spend too much time doing it. But like at least like 5 to 10 hours of this level of engagement. I don't think a council member should be spending even 40-hour weeks. That's a full-time job. And I think a council member needs to have maybe 20 hours a week, 10 to 20 hours a week on general. And that way they have a bunch of other free time to engage in either other work or just generally being in the community beyond the minimum expectations, and also to have like free time to actually consider all of these things. I think it takes a lot of deliberation and contemplation. And if you're just too damn busy, it's actually really hard to be a council member. Like there's a level to which you should be busy and you should be involved, but you need to also consider these things. And like that's one of the things where anytime I see like team members are working like super hard, and I'm like, is that completely productive, or is it more productive to be working 60, maybe 60, 80-hour weeks are like the reality for some team members, and I don't think there's an issue with that, but I think the 100-hour work week is a stretch too far, potentially, because there isn't any time to, you know, like, not necessarily de-stress, but like unwind and really let something sink in. And I think like in specifically the role of a council member where it's super responsible, you're making decisions that impact the entire DAO, you should have some free time where you're allowing things to sink in and really absorb what's the like implications of what you've discussed in whether that be meetings, discussions, like conversations with the general public, anything.
Yep. Yo, I feel attacked right now about those long work weeks.
Well, that's different for you though, because you don't have to deeply deliberate every single choice and every single word.
Yeah. So let me get this straight. So you're saying about 5 hours for reading the IIP chat, being around there, another 5 to 10 hours actually having conversations with the community. Are there any other specific duties or roles that you think outside of that? So right now we're up to let's say 15 to 20 hours per week. So what other duties do you think that would be required outside of those, just the communication and being present?
So beyond communication and being present, I also think you should be advocating for the voices of different community members. So like people will come forward to you as a council member and they will request certain things, or like ask for certain things or whatever it may be, or suggest things. And there's been times where like I'll just take what they said, bring it straight into a council meeting because it's so damn good, and just present it directly. And it's really advocating for, because as a council member, like personally, I'm not like a master of one thing. I'm good at multiple things. I'm probably the most like diverse one. I'm less specialized than other council members. So like I'll just take something on board from somebody that's maybe more specialized than me, and I'll bring it forward and I'll advocate for that idea. And like part of that could be like assisting people in writing IIPs. Anyone that's asked me for like and educating the public as well. I don't think it's a core responsibility in the council members, and I don't think it's necessarily a requirement for every council member, because some people might be more introverted than others and less, you know, social or in that way. So I think that's fair enough. There should be different types of people on the council, and I'm game for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, and let's go into the final question. And this is not a question that I gave to you guys because it's kind of just come up. So it'll be an off-the-cuff answer for you. And that is, right now, we're seeing a conversation about potentially changing the Illuvitar's revenue. And instead of distributing that back to stakers, potentially giving that back to the treasury for runway. I'm going to leave that as it is open. What do you think on that? What's your stance? What are your thoughts on that?
So I've written this already in the IIP discussion where this is happening. My stance on this is, one, this is one of those rare occasions where I don't think it should be just up to the council at the end of the day. I think this is something that you really want to make the community at large aware of and ask their opinion of it. And there's no better way to do that than through a snapshot vote with good old VILV, square root of how much ILV you have, all of that. And I've been chatting to Dick to make that happen. And I think that will be happening, in fact, because, you know, I think this affects everyone. And I think it's important that we garner that sentiment from the actual people that it affects very directly, because it's one thing that isn't like, it's not a small thing, and it's also a one-off. So this isn't something that we want to make a habit of doing. This is something that we want, it's just like, why sell a bunch of ILV that we have when we could actually raise it directly using this mechanism? And at the moment, at least for myself, like when the revenue distribution we got from the land sale, even when that happened, like I was like, I got like an ILV from it or something as Revdis, and I was like, I wish I didn't have this ILV. I wish this ILV was in the hands of the DAO right now. And because as like everyone's getting a little piece, but as a total, if that money just went straight to the DAO, maybe wouldn't need to be raising any money right now. So I think it's so I think it's kind of a no-brainer, and I'm personally in support of it because in the short term, it means we don't get some Revdis from a Luvitar sale right now, but it means that the DAO and the gaming studio ultimately is in a position where they can continue to produce for the long term without any kind of concerns, and it doesn't help like the team that is creating this, and it definitely doesn't help a creative mindset if you're concerned about runway in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So it's just best to have that dealt with. So, but like on that topic, like I do not want SILV2 to be taken off the table because people have been accumulating SILV2. I've spoken to multiple people that have accumulated a ridiculous amount of it, expecting to be able to use it in Illuvitars. I don't want to rug people. That's I think unacceptable, and I'm really glad that Kieran also agrees that's like flat out not shouldn't happen. But beyond that, I have no issue with 50% or even 100% of that revenue going just directly into the runway, just being the ETH used just directly just sold for USDC or something and added to the runway. Whether that should be 50% or 100%, I reckon just depends on just how many people agree with the proposal altogether, and that will be garnered through a snapshot. So if it's like a ridiculous majority, like 99% of people agree, then just use 100%, and it should also be capped. So like once we've raised 10 mil or 20 or whatever, once we hit that number, it just goes back to normal Revdis. Or once, if it starts at 100, maybe once we hit a certain milestone, we go down to 50%. And once we hit the next milestone, we go back to or like just full Revdis as usual.
Yeah. Now, awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on all these questions, man. Is there anything you want to say to close this out? Any last words before we end this?
Well, definitely thank you for having me on. And I appreciate anybody that votes for me. I wouldn't be running if I didn't feel that I still had value to offer Illuvium, and I feel that I definitely do, and that what I do and what I offer is unique from the other people running. But I leave that up to your own discernment, and I definitely encourage absolutely anybody watching this to also watch all of the other interviews, compare, take notes between the nominees, and vote for the person that you feel best represents your needs, but also the needs of the DAO at large, because that's ultimately what matters.
Yeah, awesome. All right, appreciate you, Vet. Appreciate you for coming on and sitting in the hot seat. For everyone else that's watching, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you follow this channel. There's going to be a lot more content on governance coming out from here moving forward. So just make sure you follow this and stay up to date. But anyway, I appreciate you guys.